I'm sorry. Two small words that hold enough power to alter the trajectory of an entire relationship, that can get to the heart and the ethos of a human connection. Two words that can influence a single individual or 100 people or 1,000 or millions. Those two words exist on a spectrum of emotions so vast it can cover vindication, validation, to retribution, and even punishment. Without nuance, without context, and without clearly communicated intent, those two words, I'm sorry, can mean absolutely nothing. And I'm sorry if that came off as a bit dramatic. I'm very, I'm fascinated, I'm passionate about the way that humans connect to one another, especially the social technology we've come to know as apologies. I have a vivid memory of what has to be one of the first apologies that I've ever offered. And my mom is here in attendance. I think she'll remember this story too. I was young, I was about 5 years old, and we were walking through my neighborhood, me and my parents. We passed by this house that had these beautiful white, iridescent, decorative rocks strewn across their lawn, right up to the sidewalk. My parents were walking a few steps ahead, so I just reached down and picked one up because who doesn't love a great rock? We walked a bit further, and eventually they noticed that I was playing with this rock in my hands, and they asked where I got it from. And I hesitated for a moment, and then I turned back and I said, I got it from over there. And they said, well, Christopher, that's not yours to take. That's not your property. And you're going to go back and return it. And I was a little bit confused. Even that at that age, I knew that there were hundreds of rocks, that this rock wouldn't be missed. I don't even think anybody saw me take it. But okay. So we go back down the street. I return the rock into the pile, and I figured that was it. And they say, Christopher, we'd like you to apologize to the homeowners for taking their property. I was mortified. That sounded super uncomfortable and unnecessary, but they were serious. So up to the door I went, and I knock, and they answer. And I said, hi, I'm really sorry. I took one of your rocks, but I've returned it, and I promise I won't take another one, and I'm sorry. And they must have been looking over my shoulder, as parents do, and knew that this was like a teachable lesson. And they were so gracious. And they said, thank you for returning our rock. And thank you for the apology. We forgive you. And that was that, except it wasn't. I was so confused. I didn't understand why. I mean, there were just so many things going through my mind. Why was this necessary? Why did I have to acknowledge wrongdoing when I don't even think any harm was caused? I was really confused. There's been decades and decades of research into sociology in general, but in particular, the way that we develop and deliver apologies. And there's even some great TEDx videos that I urge you to look up and watch. They're fascinating, really interesting about how they're developed and delivered. Today, I want to pay tribute to that young, curious, confused boy and talk about the why of apologies. Why do we apologize? What's in it for us to apologize? How do we receive them? What are they for? What do they mean? And I'm fascinated by this concept. So really quickly, brief history on the meaning of the word apology. It originally did not mean I'm sorry. What it meant was something said or written in defense or justification of, in the minds of others, something that they perceive to be wrong. So nowhere in that definition Was there any acknowledgement or talk of remorse or anything like that? It just meant a defense. And one of the most famous examples of that is Plato's Apology of Socrates. And in that account, that philosophical recount, he outlined Socrates' self defense during his impiety trial in 399 BC. We all remember that. So, when did the word apology come to mean I'm sorry? Like a lot of words and their meanings in the English language, when in doubt, we can usually blame Shakespeare. So, and in Richard III, there was a line that when my lord, there needs no such apology, which was one of the first written accounts that gave apology this hint of acknowledgement or remorse or even empathy. Throughout human evolution, we have needed relationships. We've needed to collaborate. Our survival was essential. We knew very early on when humans began humaning that we needed each other. We needed to collaborate. So those relationships had to be built and nurtured and fostered. And when they were fractured or damaged, they needed to be repaired. We started families and formed tribes, which created villages and then communities, cities. And now we have countries. And still to this day, humans work together. There are relationships all over the world every day. We need them. They're inherent to our human experience. So, what are apologies for? What function do they have? Generally speaking, they're to acknowledge harm, accept responsibility, and initiate repair. They're fundamental to trust, and trust is at the heart of every connection and relationship that we have. They serve to repair, they serve to nurture. And the meaning of apology may have evolved and continues to evolve, but that seed of connection remains. Different cultures approach accountability and apologies very differently. One of the most beautiful examples is happens all across Canada in our Indigenous communities, where they have these restorative practices, such as sentencing circles and support circles, where they will bring in elders and the person who caused harm, the person who was harmed, plus family members and community members. And they will collaboratively approach restorative justice without the lens of retribution or punishment, because they accept responsibility as a community amongst themselves for anyone who was harmed. In modern Western democracies, call it, we've seen a rise in institutional and public apologies, which are very common and super heartfelt in politics, for example, wh- which is a really good segue into this little nuance called the non-apology. And we're all familiar with these. And a non-apology sounds something like this. I'm sorry if I hurt you. I'm sorry that you feel bad. Some of them just get straight to the point. Sorry, not sorry. And my personal favorite, um, the decisively factual yet disingenuous mistakes were made. So, what non apologies have in common is they shift the blame back onto the victim by centering their feelings or their reaction as the true root of this uncomfortable, fractured connection that we found ourselves in. And the last example, mistakes were made, sort of removes any sense of involvement and frames the incident as an action that just happened without any acknowledgement that there was an initiator to that act. None of us like to receive a non apology, but to an extent, whether consciously or not, we've all been guilty of offering one. And this is the complexity of apologizing because when we've been wronged, we navigate an entire realm of emotions from entitlement, from wanting retribution to wanting compassion to wants and needs that get really convoluted with themselves. As I grew older, I found myself becoming a bit of a people pleaser and an over apologizer. And the structure of this talk came from my own reflection after many years of therapy, which is awesome, by the way. Go explore yourself. It's great. It's really interesting. But I realized that I'd become a peacemaker in all the wrong ways. So what I mean by that is I framed apologies as a way to keep the peace, as a way to mitigate future escalation or to diffuse the situation. I'm also a very compassionate person. So virtuously in my mind, I thought I was giving a gift to everyone, being the first to extend the olive branch, being the first to apologize. But there's a real bounce back effect to that behavior. We often see people pleasing and over apologizing people who have experienced trauma as well. It's not exclusive to any of these realms, but it is important to understand that when we over apologize, it begins to dilute its meaning, sometimes to the effect where people will lose respect for us if we're too forward with our initiating of apologies. Like I said, the self fascinating to me. It's really deep. I wish I had more time. Different mediums for apologizing, those matter too. Written apologies, verbal apologies. I was thinking last night, you know how AI makes mistakes sometimes? Well, I've yet to receive an email from ChatGPT going, yeah, that advice I gave you last week, my bad. But it'd be nice. So we do have to think about where these apologies are coming from and the impact that they have. Technological apologies are a really interesting space to be in. We've all encountered this. We go to pay online, we hit submit, and it's like something went wrong. Like, what does that mean? We know that. And the framing and the impact of these apologies is something that I feel is being eroded as we move into and through the 21st century. The way that we receive apologies is just as important. And this is something that I had to reflect on myself because there's intention. And every time there's an apology exchanged or offered, it speaks to the connection made. A connection is between two parties. And for an apology to be effective, there has to be a mutual benefit. Receiving apologies can feel as uncomfortable as offering them. Sometimes we're not ready to forgive. So there's boundaries around timelines, what's comfortable for us. Sometimes we're stuck in a state of entitlement where we feel we've been so wronged that an apology would be a concession rather than a path forward. Today, we live in a realm absorbed by technology. And it's my belief that our dependence for millions of years on each other, on these relationships and collaborating is being eroded simply because we're more comfortable with our independence. We're able to be more independent. So why would we spend the time or the risk of our reputation or just risking an uncomfortable theater to offer a genuine apology when we're able to do so much ourselves and we rely less on each other? Now, I can't envision a world where we don't need each other. I just can't. Human connection is inherent. We love to connect. We're inherently curious. So, to plant a seed with you, I want to leave you with this. The next time that you've been wronged or that you cause harm, I want you to think about the power of those two words, I'm sorry, and the impact it can have on ourselves, on those around us, and its influence on events that will happen long after we're gone. Thank you.